Olá, bom dia. Carl Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal live stream, YouTube channel and podcast. A very good morning to you. Yes, and hola, bom dia to you. And tudo bem? How are you doing? Let me know in the comments. Fascinating show, I think, ahead today because we've got Vaughan Willmore joining us. He's been talking to the police, not in that way. He lives in the Algarve, has a background in police training, and has been talking to the Algarve police force and personnel in the police down there about their experience of policing the Algarve, which I think is going to be fascinating. What a job they have on their hands. So we will begin with a little bit of a look at the weather, see what's happening there. Because as I was saying to somebody yesterday, I was on the phone to Barclays in the UK. Don't worry, I'm not going to give out any personal details. You know how it is, though. 45 minutes talking to a lovely lady. I think she was from Newcastle or somewhere like that, working from home. 45 minutes. And I said, we're in that place with the weather, because she's in the UK and she's saying to me, oh, it must be lovely at the moment. It's horrible in the UK at the moment. I said, well, we're in that place at the moment in Portugal where we've got that lovely weather we moved here for. And we've got to that point where the expats are now complaining it's too hot. It's that window that we work with, isn't it? Debbie Dews is here. How are you, my love? Debbie Dews, good morning. Beautiful day. Carl, good morning to you. Thank you, Debbie. I hope you're well. I hope you're doing great. And where's everyone else this morning? I know there's a few people watching, but a bit slow on the comments this morning. It's always lovely to hear from you, as you know. So let's have a look at the weather very quickly. Let's have a look at these high temperatures that are causing all of us to waft and swoon. Lisbon, 19 at the moment, 28-degree high to look forward to. Some merciful cloud in Lisbon today. But tomorrow, a sunny day and lots of sun until next week, where there'll be a bit of wind, a bit of sea breeze in Lisbon on Tuesday, but temperatures reaching 33 by Monday again, and a 31-degree Saturday. Porto, 17 at the moment and cloudy, 25 to look forward to, though, and a clear run of sunny days for the next 5 days, some cloud coming early next week. Coimbra, rain didn't manifest, did it? 30 degrees to look forward to today, currently 18 and a bit cloudy. I'm feeling that. That's the kind of area I'm in, closest to anyway. 20 degrees in and out of the studio, and you saw a picture of one of our beans on the intro screen there. That was from the Good Morning Portugal garden, that picture this morning. And yeah, a lovely clean sweep of sunny days, reaching 35 degrees and 33 degrees on Saturday and Sunday, respectively. Holding out at 35 on Monday, a bit of cloud to come on Tuesday. Faro down there where Vaughan is. In that part of the country anyway, 18 degrees at the moment and sunny. I'm sure I don't need to tell him that. 25 to look forward to today, edging up to 29 tomorrow, 30 on Saturday, 28 on Sunday and 28 on Monday, and sunny days to look forward to at the beginning of next week. That's your weather. So let's have a look at some of these news stories around, and we will tie in something to do with the Algarve police force and those naughty Dutch students who came over in their droves to celebrate the end of school. It must be some sort of Dutch tradition. Let's have a look. Doing good, says Debbie Dews. Carl, thank you. Still wet in Kent. I think they're talking about the weather. That's Dave and Debbie. They spoke to my in-laws in Kent yesterday. They agree with you, Dave and Debbie. When are you making your move over here, I wonder? Paul, great and damp here near Southampton. Would expect nothing else as the delayed cricket season has just started about 4 miles from us. Yes, blame the cricket. Oh, actually, we'll have to have a look at cricket on the Expat Sport Report Saturday morning, 10 o'clock with Calvin Avery. And we've put a little package together of the NHL introduction, the National Hockey League from Wayne Barker. So that's in our podcast collection at the moment. If you didn't know anything about National Hockey League or the National Hockey League and hockey in North America, you find out all about it. I didn't, and now I feel well genned up by Wayne. Okay, that's that article. There are a few articles actually I'd like to share with you before we talk to Vaughan in just a moment. And this is, first of all, let's have a look at the Portugal Resident. I really like the coverage of the Portugal Resident, I have to say, and they're reporting here on how Marcelo, our president here in Portugal, all us expats, I think, agree that he's a really cool guy. There he is in Cascais on his own, wandering down to the beach, having a swim with his matching mask and swimming shorts. He's quite a character. And have you ever seen him in the handshake competition with Donald Trump? It's hilarious. And our president wins. I say our president. I've adopted him as my president. President Marcelo vows to visit the Algarve every week to bolster tourism. I think that's going to work. Marcelo Rebelo de Souza, to give him his full name, has promised to visit the Algarve every week this summer to help the region's struggling tourism sector overcome the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, or the COVID curveball, as I referred to it already this morning, and the UK government's decision to include mainland Portugal in its travel blacklist. Boo! He made his promise moments before a dinner in Montegordo, brought together 15 of the Algarve 16 mayors. I wonder what happened to the other one, as well as representatives from the region's tourism authorities and hotel associations. This is what he said. We have to bolster the Algarve quickly so that we feel the positive effects as soon as this year, he told reporters. That's before the EU money comes in 2022, apparently, which we spoke about yesterday. He continued, just the other day I was in Albufeira. Now I'm in here in Montegordo. I'll be visiting the region throughout the next few weeks, whenever I have time, the president said, adding that his goal is to travel to different parts of the Algarve every week. Presumably this will prompt calls from all over the country for Marcelo to visit and boost up the economy. Okay, I will leave a wonderful picture of Marcelo there as I tell you as well about no masks or social distancing as hundreds of Dutch youngsters party into the night in Albufeira. GNR police, and we'll find out more about the police in the Algarve from Vaughan in just a moment. GNR police issued dozens of fines last week in Albufeira's Ura Bar district, where large groups of mainly young Dutch holidaymakers are gathering every day without masks and without respecting social distancing recommendations. Two things there, I think. The Scandinavian countries have taken a slightly different approach to this, I think. Been a bit like, taking quite an extreme, and my immunity will deal with this kind of approach, I think. And also, they're young kids on holiday. So in a way, you might expect such recklessness, which needs to be managed. Albufeira Mayor José Carlos Rollo has already threatened to take more drastic measures if the rules imposed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 are not respected. According to a police source, several people and establishments were fined on Sunday, July the 5th for drinking alcohol in public or staying open later than they are illegally allowed, respectively. There are believed to be around nearly 2,500 Dutch holidaymakers in Albufeira, most of them youngsters celebrating the end of their school year. Who knew that was a thing, that Dutch youngsters come to Portugal to celebrate the end of their school year as a bit of a tradition? And another one, just want to share this with you briefly, a kind of corruption story, I guess, again from Natasha Don in the Portugal Resident. EDP share price dips 475 million euros as court suspends the top brass. News that top brass at EDP, and not many people have a good word to say about EDP here in Portugal, with their extortionate prices for energy and how much it costs to heat your damp Portugal home if you live in the north in the winter with our extremes of temperature. News that the top brass at EDP, anyway, going back to the article, have been suspended from their functions, has sent the energy giant share price tumbling by 475 million euros. Says Expresso, the news about Executive President Antonio Mejia and director João Manso Neto saw prices fall in a matter of minutes. The pair have long been identified in a corruption probe centering on CMEC subsidies said to have cost everyday customers in excess. This is why our bills are so high. It's cost everyday customers in excess of 2.5 billion euros. For the time being, EDP, as you might expect, has made no statement. To comment on these and other things to do with policing, we welcome to the screen now Vaughan Willmore from the Algarve. Good morning to you, Vaughan. How are you?
Good morning, Carl. I'm very well, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. I understand you got the builders in, so there might be a bit of bash boshing in the background.
Yes, could well be, but hopefully it won't be too bad.
All right,
they started quite early, actually. They've been here about 40 minutes, which wasn't something I was expecting this morning, but there you go.
You do sound surprised. It's a cultural thing, I guess. Have your builders had the traditional brandy yet with their coffee for breakfast? Oh, well, we've got a bit of a freeze.
Sorry, Carl, you dropped for a second.
Yeah, I think we both have a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue, and I'm sure that will settle down. But I was just asking if your builders have had their traditional aguardente or brandy to start the day. Oh, I mean, struggling.
Yes, at 10:30 yesterday morning. I think it's the way. I mean, to be fair, start by Thursday. it's not much fun working in this heat, particularly when you're inside a house.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to ask you a question so you can give me a long answer. We have slight difficulties with our connection here, I think. But yeah, how did you get into finding out about what the police are up to in the Algarve? What prompted you and your inquiry here?
So I've lived in Portugal for 2 years, and I work for the police service back in the UK for the College of Policing. And the College of Policing is there to set standards for policing in the UK, so for police officers and police forces, and then we give them the training to help them achieve those standards. So I've always had an interest in policing and a passion for it. And I think there's a few things that struck me when I arrived in Portugal that were different to England and my experiences. And one was how visible and high profile the police officers are here. I mean, literally, I don't think it's just a Tavera thing, but you walk into town and you see a police officer. And rightly or wrongly, that does not happen in England. So that was one of the first things that struck me. And then it was the realization about 3 months in about how nervous I was when I was seeing the GNR by the side of the road. And I thought, I don't have any reason to be nervous. Why am I feeling nervous? Why are these guys are standing there? I'm just not used to this. It's that sense of dread, which I thought, well, that would make an interesting article. And it started me more seriously. I started to question, what do I know about the police service in Portugal? And I thought, I don't know a great deal, really. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite inquisitive by nature. I was also fortunate that I had one of my neighbours works for the GNR as well. So he said, I write for a few magazines in Portugal and in England. And I said, I'm thinking of doing an article. Do you think someone will talk to me about it and I could interview someone? And he said he would have a word, which he did, to be fair. He did. And I went down to the local station in Tavera and practicing my worst Portuguese, trying to think who I needed to speak to. And I was really fortunate, and as my neighbour was there on the desk, and he introduced me to the local captain. Wow. The captain of the detachment, as they say in Portugal. So that's where it started from. And then I approached the magazine, Tomorrow Algarve, which I write for on a monthly basis, and said, would you be interested in something of this nature? And they were. So we started on a series of articles, which started last month, where I wrote about safer communities, Portugal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I spoke to Dave about that. I spoke to him again yesterday. And now we did the one about the GNR, which was in last month's edition, or this month's edition, sorry. And then next month we published the interview with the GNR captain, who was very helpful, I have to say. And as an aside, I found the GNR quite easy to get in. The PSP, I'm still knocking on the door. But I'll get there. Well,
that's an interesting distinction you remark upon there. Are you in a position to tell us about the different types? And I guess the first thing I want to say is I'm so glad it's not just me that even though I've done absolutely nothing wrong, anytime I see the GNR in my rearview mirror or even like a transit cop on the street, I've got that thing going, like it's a surge of like, goes through me.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about different kinds of police in Portugal?
Yes, I can do. Albeit on that point about the GNR, my wife is very good at many things, one of which is bursting my bubble. And when I said to her about the GNR, that I feel nervous, she asked me a question, and she said, "Yes, but do you feel reassured by their presence?"
Very good.
And I thought, that's a fair question. And actually, as someone who has an affinity with the police service, I do feel reassured by their presence. And there's also that thing, they're all armed here, aren't they, compared to Britain? And, we don't have so many armed officers. But do I feel intimidated by that? Not really. But that's a personal viewpoint. So to answer your question, there's 5 strands to the policing family in Portugal. I just need to put my glasses on at this point to remind myself. One, obviously, is the GNR. The second one is the PSP. What I didn't realise really was, I knew about the judicial police because I'd read about that in connection with some high-profile cases in the Algarve, of which I'm sure you can imagine one I'm thinking of. So I knew about those three, the GNR, the PSP and the Judicial Police. But I didn't know Immigration and Border Service, or SEF, which I knew SEF. I didn't know that they were deemed to be part of the policing family. And then there's something called the Economic and Food Safety Authority, which is also part of what they call the policing family here in Portugal. I started on the GNR because my neighbour gave me that way in, but I also thought it'd be quite interesting because it is in fact a paramilitary security force. So it's a gendarmerie. Is that how you pronounce it? Called gendarmerie?
Sounds right to me. Sounds right to me.
So that's where I started really. And I confess, I still haven't quite got my head around, and I'm not sure the GNR and PSP have as yet. The delineation between what they do and where that stops and the other one picks up. I know that the theory of it, that the GNR is a national force and covers all of the country, and the PSP has responsibility for the cities. But I just haven't quite got my head around how that works in practice as yet.
Okay, and we can't talk about the GNR without remarking upon their fabulous uniform. I think that's a source of envy for for people as well as attraction. I think it's one of the I mean, you've probably seen a few, having worked with the police force in the UK and studied policing tactics, you've probably seen a few uniforms from around the world. I think the GNR one is pretty amazing. If I've got it right, which is the boots, the tight-fitting trousers and the tight-fitting blue polo top and beret.
Yeah, that's quite typical. Yes, that's you're not far off with that. I mean, what we're also looking at, which I think will be really interesting as well, is after the interview with the GNR captain, we're doing something on the mounted police in Tavira. Sorry, why do I say Tavira? The mounted police in Portugal. So that goes into a whole new sphere if you're into uniforms, Carl. Perhaps you are.
I didn't say the uniforms, but
heaven forbid we should start any rumours. But yeah, that's very much. I don't think I'm doing a disservice. Say ceremonial part of the policing. So that looks really interesting, and there's someone who's helping with that in the GNR. So that's an interesting way to go as well.
Amazing.
I mean, one of the things when I started the article was I just put something out on my Facebook page, and it was quite interesting, the comments I had back. I don't know whether your listeners might have any comments, but I said I'm doing some work with regards to policing in the Algarve, and I'd welcome people's opinions. And it was interesting what came back. I did have a strong body of opinion that came back, and I reflected this in the article in the magazine that said, actually, we find them really intimidating. They don't look welcoming, they don't look friendly. And I've raised issues with them and they weren't particularly helpful. And I thought, I'm just going to let this Facebook thread breathe and see where it goes, and I won't try and direct us. But I have to acknowledge that was, some of the thinking that was there. It did gradually shift. Whether that's part of the demographic on my Facebook, I don't know, until people were actually saying, actually, I find them very, very good. I've raised issues, they've been polite, they've been helpful. I do feel reassured when I see them. So I tried to strike that balance in the article by acknowledging that some people do find them, and their interactions with them can be, when they're stopped by the side of the road. But another guy said, he plays sports here, walking football. He plays walking football. And he remarked how, I don't think it was GNR, it was probably PSP, he said an officer came to their football training because he'd found a watch outside the stadium a week earlier, and he wanted to know if it was someone's watch. And you just think, that just would not happen in England, would it? And, you do, we see them in cafes around here quite a lot, just interacting with people. So, I try to reflect that broad range of opinion in my article as well, which I always try and be true to myself and true to the feedback that comes through.
Excellent. It sounds like you're a proper journalist there. We've got a little bit of feedback coming in. Morning all. I'm actually on the GNR Facebook page, which does have useful information. So some nice yeah, intel coming in from the crowd here. So thank you, Veronica, for that. Good morning to you. Yeah, that's and I think that probably does help as well, because as well as the natural bristle you might get of being stopped or thinking you might be stopped, there's the added cultural thing as well, isn't there, going on? Because you don't know what it's like to be stopped and spoken to by the local police, and you don't have the language, so there will be additional challenges going on in your mind, in your psychology. Ana Lucia, who is in the UK, I believe, but is Portuguese by origin, says, all I can say is the Portuguese police are the most sexy in Europe, hands down, and fittest. There's a glowing endorsement for the local force. Have nothing but good things to say about the GNR. Always polite, helpful. And there you go again. You see, I was just saying it on behalf of everybody. They helpful and they look good in uniform. Going back to Marcelo, the comment from Ty Johnson is a superstar compared to UK politicians. And it's a good morning. Cloudy again. I think they're in Villanova de Milfonge, Claire and Steve and Wayne Barker. The aforementioned Wayne Barker, the National Hockey League expert. Hola todos, about to jump in the car, will attempt to listen, I guess, online or on his phone or something like that. So we're getting good feedback about the police. And I meant, the whole thing about policing the Algarve, that's going to be a mixed bag. What was one of the most, or a few of the most surprising things for you about what they said about their job down there?
Yeah, good question, Carl. It's very similar to the question I asked the captain. His name's, I name him in the article, Captain Valent, and he's based in the Eastern Algarve. And everything that he gave me had to go through their PR department, of course, but I found him very good to deal with. And I said to him, what are the two main challenges that you face as a police service? And I also flipped that round afterwards and said, what's the best thing about working for the GNR? The challenges he said are, I think, one we could probably guess. He talked about the variation in the population, particularly here in the Algarve during the summer season, and how difficult that can be to police. I think he didn't say it explicitly, but I guess it's not just about the numbers, albeit that's a challenge, but it's how transient it is as well.
Yeah.
So that was one of the challenges about that fluctuation. The other thing, which I hadn't quite picked up on and did surprise me, but you may know about this and your listeners. He said about the dispersion of the population in the Algarve, and he talked about a lot of people think of the Algarve as being by the sea, but actually a lot of people want to live inland, and they seek a more rural existence, and they like that isolation. But he said that can be a very difficult part of the population to reach, and I think he was talking. Actually, I should have checked this, but I think he was talking about physically it's difficult to reach because they don't have the intel, but perhaps also on a more intellectual level, emotional level, it is difficult to connect with them because they could be Brits, as you say, there might be language difficulties, they could be other nationalities. So he talked about those two main challenges, about the variation in the population and how difficult it can be to kind of engage with those people who live more rurally. Sorry, go
on, carry on.
Yeah, the other questions I asked him, I said, what's the best thing about working for the GNR? And then I asked him about, what kind of, this magazine goes out to so many people. What kind of messages do you have for the British community? And again, I thought that was interesting. He came up with a couple of things. He said the best thing about working for the GNR, he talked about just feeling useful to the population, knowing they're there to solve a problem and that they can do that. And he talked about, I think, as you would want from a police officer, he talked about helping the most vulnerable in society. And I think sometimes you read those things, it feels like words on a page. But I have to say, in the interactions I've had with the GNR and with Captain Valent particularly, I did sense, and I do think you get this sense from speaking to people, how genuine he was. He's always come back to me promptly. I've always had a sense he's answered questions as honestly as he could. So he talked about, that sense of worth and doing something good, particularly for the most deprived people in the population. His key messages, really for us as Brits here, but I think they probably apply to other parts of other nationalities, were around sharing information with the police. If something happens, good, bad, or indifferent, or particularly bad, flagging it to them as quickly as possible. So A, they can try and do something about it, but B, they can factor it into their arrangements going forward. And I think that was kind of to be expected, really. I'd expect a police officer to say that. The second thing I thought was more interesting, and perhaps on a more emotional level, it was a bit of a pushback from him, and I thought, credit to you really for doing that. He talked about personal responsibility, and he said, whether you're a resident here or you're holidaying here, please do take advantage of everything that Algarve has to offer. And I think you could read into that Portugal has to offer. But, do it responsibly. Mm. And he used the phrase, well-being and safety depends on all of us. And I thought, I'm going to use that phrase for my next article. That will be the headline of my next article. Well-being and safety depends on all of us. But I thought it was a good balance. He talked about, the GNR has to step up. We have to act on the information you give us. But also policing, people safe we all have a responsibility to do that.
That's really great. And what you would hope for from a progressive and modern police force, or I suppose it's the difference, I guess, isn't it, between a force and a service, which I know is a semantic thing that the police all over the world, I guess, wrestle with. Because on the one hand, you do have people in society who feel like, or actually do want to kill you, coming at you in your daily line of work. And then next minute, you're handing out a fine to a Dutch student thinking, I didn't sign up for this. It must be really boring and mundane to do some of that sort of stuff. And that's their daily life, isn't it? That mix of, helping the most vulnerable, dishing out fines sometimes, and dealing with the most serious and horrific things that a society can serve up. I mean, it's an incredible job that these people do. It really is, I think. A few more comments. Gary said, this is interesting, I think. I get the feeling from some of the older locals that the GNR still suffers from a residual negativity left over from the times of the dictatorship, in much the same way they do in Spain. So a kind of authority thing going on there and a historical thing. Sunny Fundao, up to 36 degrees over there. Thank you, Julie, for that. Mag saying bon dia from Lisboa this morning. Good morning to you, Mag. And Will Thompson checking in as well with bon dia. Yeah, so have you got... Oh, actually, you reminded me, when I was living in central Portugal, a different part of central Portugal, we were playing in the park with our kids. There was a dad there with his child, started talking to him. He told us he was a police officer. He lived quite near us, or he worked quite near us. I said, you got to pop round for a beer sometime, because, that's what I think is a good idea, making friends, connecting with people. Turned up the same night. I went home, bought some beer. I'm not a big drinker, so I thought I better get some beers in. And what I'll do is I'll get some of those tremoso beans, that the guys here like to eat with their beer. And he turned up the very same night. And I'm thinking, that's probably pretty good policing, isn't it? Get an invitation from an expat, take them up on it, pop in, make sure everything's all right, know your patch. And I just thought that's like organic policing, isn't it? Pretty smart.
Yeah. Actually, you say that. There's my wife runs a dog grooming business here in Tavira, and we base it at home. It's funny you should say that, because we do have a neighbour who's with the PSP, and whereas most people will message us or phone us, he does pop round. He knocks on the door. And I didn't know you were going to say that, obviously, but he is the only one who does that. It can be a little bit annoying at times when it's like 8 o'clock, because no one else knocks on the door, but you always know it's him. So, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the inquisitive nature of being a police officer. I don't know. But you're right. Yeah, he does knock on the door.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so maybe to round up then. Oh, actually, no, one thing before we do that I was going to ask you about, how to manage that anxiety of being stopped, how to respond and so on, because I'm sure you'll have something to say about that. But the publication or publications you write for, please give big those up for us.
Thanks, Carl. I write for Tomorrow Algarve magazine, which is predominantly based in the western side of the Algarve. It's a terrific, lively magazine. I just work as a freelance basis. So, but yeah, it's a very much a community-based magazine. And as I mentioned, Sophie is the editor, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to have a chat with you at some point and feature you in the magazine. And then the other magazine I write for is Where I Live, which is in the eastern Algarve. And that's a similar type of magazine, East Algarve magazine, very community focused. So yeah, I write for those two. And also a couple of magazines back in the UK, Best of British. There's an article just about to be published on that, all about a thing that I play every week, or I did before the recent events of walking football.
Okay.
And also a magazine called Yours Retro, which is all about music and film, which is a passion of mine. So yeah, I write for those 4 magazines. It all help. What do you use something on your crowdfunding, don't you? Paying for the seeds.
Yes.
Paying for the seeds. Paying for seeds, yeah.
Worth a packet of seeds. What are they?
I'll have to think of something. Yeah, again, I'm like, I'll use something similar. I'll credit you accordingly, Carl, but I'll think of something. All of this helps to pay the bills. Is a more mundane example, but I'll think of something better than that. So yeah, there's 4 good magazines. Yeah.
It's really nice to hear of anyone making a living from writing these days. So well done.
Yeah, well, people often say to you, so what do you write about? And I say, I'll write about anything you wish as long as you pay me.
That's the spirit.
A lot of people are happy just to see their name in print, but I've been writing part-time for many, many years, and it is with a purpose in mind, which I do find interesting. I do have a passion for it. And I'm actually working on a book as well, Carl, so invite me back on to plug my book.
You see, as I say to a lot of people who come on here, see this as your home and your community. Come on when you've got something to say. And it's been fantastic talking to you today. Just to round up then, this anxiety thing about being pulled over, about being stopped, about being spoken to by the police, it's drilled into us from being kids possibly, isn't it? And I know people have different ideas about that, as we're seeing all over the world right now, about interacting with the police. But what would you say to expats, explorers in Portugal, who are coming over here, as the expression goes? What's the best way to deal with that situation?
Good question. I suppose, how would I deal with it myself, or how would I advise my wife? I'd say always have some ID with you.
Yeah.
Because I think they always appreciate that, whether it's a driving license or a passport. Try and speak the language as much as you can. I know that's easier said than done, but one of the people or it is for me, but when I did that posting on Facebook, that was a common theme that came back. Said we do try and speak the language, even if it's just the basics, and that seems to help with them. I do think actually as well, though, that the police have a responsibility around this. And one of the ideas I have, which I haven't pursued as yet, because one of the things I've kind of contrasted in my own mind is the difference between policing here and in the UK. And I wonder whether they should do more community outreach activity, which might help break down some of those barriers. So wouldn't it be terrific if someone from the GNR came on your program?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be terrific if they did something in the locality? For me, it's been selfish, it's Tavira. And I'd be happy to facilitate something of that nature. So, yeah, I think there are little things we can do, but, I'm also going to try and speak to the people I know and see whether there's something that we might be able to facilitate, if it's in the English language, I guess, to help break down some of those barriers. Safer Communities Portugal's also very good. I mean, they have some information on their websites which are very good, and they do dedicate a lot of time and energy with regards to that. And you might know it as well as better than I do, Carl. I came across something the other day about a translation service, free translation service that's been offered here. So if you do have to interact with them, not by the side of the road, but if you do have to phone them and you can't speak the language and they're not speaking the language, then that translation service seems quite good. Do you have the details? Yeah.
I don't to hand, but that's a really good shout. And I guess that's for a situation where you get deeper into a conversation or an inquiry of some sort. But I know the Portuguese government do provide translation services to make that easier, and that's going to be best for both sides, isn't it? To be in that situation of being able to communicate more effectively. Gary says a psychologist once said compliance is based on a certain amount of fear. Yeah, and I think, well, I suppose there's a lot of truth in that. But as you were saying before, Vaughan, this is all about personal responsibility as well, isn't it? So I guess we could take responsibility for our fear and our interactions and how we show up in relation to the police and any other situation in our life, of course. Vaughan, it's been amazing talking to you. And yeah, you must come back to talk about music and film at some point, because that's an interesting area for expats and explorers, I think, isn't it? The kids' films here are in Portuguese, they translate. The grown-up movies, Hollywood tends to be in the original voiceover, doesn't it? And the whole thing about going to the cinema in Portugal, I think, will be great. But I'm sure you've got a much broader base to speak from with music and film than that.
No, I think it's. Sorry, this is more a British magazine. I should have said. Sorry, I thought. So this is. I'm writing about. Well, I've pitched them about 5 ideas. So I'm waiting to see which one they bite. I should hear this week. I'm hopeful over this week. On the face of it, they're eager. But yeah, it might be an interesting one about Portuguese cinema. Might be a story to tell there. Yeah, I mean, we use, obviously, there's various services available, but we use the Mayo service here, and that has the subtitles, which we find very good and very slow going, picking up the language for me, which says more about me than anything else. But I'm really keen to try and do it, and I do find TV good in that respect.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip to leave with there. Watching movies, getting I was doing it last night. I was watching a very British scandal, I think it called, the Stephen Frears movie about Jeremy Thorpe. I mean, what an incredible story.
Oh, yeah.
One thing, brilliantly made film, and then you've got the subtitles in Portuguese on there, helping you learn while you're enjoying the movie. Vaughan, so great to talk to you this morning. Thank you. Really appreciate you pop jumping on. And as I said, very welcome to come back in the future as you see fit. Thank you
Thanks, Carl.
All of us, and have a great day down there in the Algarve. Your weather's looking beautiful today, right?
It is, yeah. It's been very warm the last few days, yeah. Yeah, have a good day, Carl. Nice to speak to you. Bom dia.
Bom dia. Bye for now.